I had a new colleague at the time who had just come to the university and became interested in helping out with some of these fire studies. We didn't have any we didn't have any graduate students at the time working on this. So Steve Gaskell and I were working on a feeding study series. And the goal of that study series was to manipulate how and when crew members got calories throughout the work shift and to determine how that would influence how hard they worked, or if we could change the work output, the physical work output, by just manipulating their diet throughout the day strategically. And so we went to this fire on the Rogue River outside of, what was it, Gold, on southernmost part of Oregon, up the Rogue River. And so we're in this big fire camp that was a campground that had shut down to accommodate this massive fire camp, huge fire in southern Oregon. And so Steve and I were there, and within the first, like most of the fires, nothing changing. Data collection early in the morning, getting things set up, getting all the supplemental foods that we were going to give these crews. It was, in that time, we were giving them a liquid carbohydrate supplement that they were going to have every hour on the line. So we were busy in the morning making that, and then nothing during the day. We started to use some other pieces of equipment at that time, some little monitors that we could put in their Nomex fire shirt. So we put those in their Nomex fire shirt, and that would give us an idea of how hard they were working each hour on the line. So we had enormous amounts of downtime during the day as usual, and we noticed there were a lot of blackberry bushes in this fire camp. And it was like prime, perfect season. These blackberries were giant. So I just started picking them to take to breakfast every morning. Pick a handful and take them and have them with my cereal or whatever. And I thought, man, we should take some of these home. These are just going to go bad. They're just food for the deer here. So I grabbed a couple Ziploc bags and within no time filled up a gallon Ziploc and thought, I want more of these things. Because if you got this much, you want this much more or that much more. And so went to the grocery store, bought a bunch of gallon Ziploc bags, just picking them. Both Steve and I were just going crazy picking them, filling these giant Ziploc bags with blackberries. All along, nobody else is picking them. We have plenty of them to go around. So we start filling up a big cooler full of these blackberries, all the while thinking, we're going to take these home to Missoula, and we're just going to, I don't know what we're going to do with them. We'll freeze them. We'll do something with them. So we collect. The study comes to an end, and we're ready to drive out of the fire camp, picking a few more blackberries on the way. And we get out of camp a ways, and I say to Steve, man, I wonder how much we picked. We picked a ton. He says, well, let's pull off and weigh them. So we pull off, take them out of the cooler, and weigh them all up. We had 59 pounds of blackberries that we were taking home, all frozen, really well packaged. And both Steve and I look at each other and think, 59? Wouldn't it be great to round that up to 60? And he's like, yeah, we should pick some more. And I'm like, you know what? Hold. Let's not. Let's just let it lie. Because in the field, especially on studies like this, if you can collect this much data, the temptation is to go one more day or add one more thing to what they have to wear. Or let's measure this on top of that. Why? It might not have anything to do with the research question, but because you might have the opportunity to it, the temptation to measure more than you need to is always present. And this, to me, was an example of that. The temptation to go one step further, just 1 pound further, was so strong. But I'm like, no, you know what? Let's leave it there. Let's call it the Blackberry paradox and just let it drop. And that being that the paradox or this paradigm that you're placed in as a researcher, I have the opportunity to collect more. I should get more data. I should get more measurements. And yet more is not always better. You want to be able to answer your research question as simple and as straightforward as you can. Otherwise, the answer gets muddled in how you express it or how you explain it. And so I felt like that was a really strong symbol of that paradox that we as researchers have to tackle all the time. especially when you're out in the field and you just don't know when the next time you're going to be out there might be. And I've shared that, not so much that story, but that concept. I constantly share that with graduate students, that their goal is to collect 100 things. And yet the question is real defined. And I constantly am saying you collect what you need to and do it well. Make sure you get what you need to and make sure that that's quality, and then answer your question, because guaranteed that question is going to lead to another question. And if you don't answer it well, that next question is going to be out of focus. It's going to be really hard for you to define that and tackle that downstream. So that's the wonder of picking blackberries in Oregon and that paradox that ensued.